Welcome to Pikes on Pike, a podcast where the two Pike sisters discuss the works of young adult horror author Christopher Pike. Hi, Bree.
Hi, Ash. How's it going?
Well, in the past, I actually think it's been about 2 years. I think it's actually been more than one.
We're the worst.
We were just discussing how long it's been since we've recorded an episode, and I want to say, well, I know I was still at my last job.
Yeah.
So.
It's been a minute.
It's been a beat.
Sorry, folks. If anyone's listening,
I mean, I'm
cares.
not. My life happened.
Yeah. That's true. Ashley got a better job. Much better job.
And then, as is the case with better jobs that actually make, requirements of you.
Yeah.
You lose your time.
Right.
But we're back.
We're back.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And this is the second attempt at recording the episode for Christopher Pike's fourth book, Last Act. Mm-hmm. You'll have to pardon that pawing sound in the background because my cat is using the litter box. That's what she thinks of this book. So, picking up where we left off with Last Act.
Yes.
And what a rip-roaring good time.
I really do like this book. Like, out of all the ones we've read so far, we were talking about this earlier, and I love Weekend, but I really do like Last Act because I'm a big fan of a crime procedural. I'm actually rewatching all of the Midsummer Murders on Acorn right now because I am my mother's daughter. And this book feels more like a crime procedural to me. It seems to have more of those aspects, and the mystery part of it is like basically the entire center of the narrative. So I like that a lot. And I liked it when I was 13, and I apparently still like it at 38. So it's cool.
Yes. Mm-hmm. We were just talking about, there are a lot of things about this book that make it a lot different from his other books.
Yeah. Yeah, it's as long as some of the other books. We were talking about the length of that too before we get into what the story is about. I made a note of this. Yeah, it's 226 pages, so it's the second longest of the four that we've read so far, because Weekend was 240. Slumber Party was 176, which when I say that seems insanely short considering how much happens in that book. But yeah, so this is a long one too, but there are a lot of red herrings in this book. I mean, there are a lot of red herrings in many of his books, but in this one there's a lot of like, maybe this person did it, maybe this person did it, and I think
the character outright makes a list of people who she thinks.
Right. Yeah.
So.
Yeah. And then there's the play within the story itself. So there's just a lot of stuff going on.
There's a lot to this narrative.
There is. True. Yeah, it's fun. So let me tell you all real quick what it's about. I will give you a quick 2-minute summary. And I really mean it. We're trying to keep our summaries more summary, says the English professor. I'm always telling my students, keep it concise. Take your own advice. So basically what happens in this book is it's a story of a new girl moving to a new town. She moves from California to Iowa when her parents get divorced. And she goes to high school. She's a high school student. And basically the entire story is she meets a group of kids. She becomes friends with these group of kids that have been friends forever. And she gets involved in the drama club, and they put on this production. And it's called Final Chance. And so the first part of the book is her meeting everyone and learning about them and getting ready for the play. And then the play happens. And then because this is a Christopher Pike book, after they put on the play, someone is shot and killed. One of the girls that they all became friends with, or were friends with, is killed in the play. And the main protagonist of the story, Melanie, the new girl, is arrested for the murder of Rindy. who's the girl who's killed. And then the entire second part of the book is Melanie trying to figure out who framed her because she did not shoot Rindy. Spoiler alert. Or she didn't. I shouldn't say that because that's where things get a little weird.
Well, it's too bad, Brie, because it's already in the podcast.
I know. Damn it. She did shoot her, but she didn't kill her. She didn't murder her. And so the second half of the book is her trying to figure that out. And that is basically the entire arc of the book. And then obviously a lot of plot points happen, which we're going to talk about. So look at that summary. Look at me.
That was amazing. That was incredible. I gotta say. I do want to talk about the characters though real quick.
Yeah,
because
let's do
there's
it.
some doozies in this book. So we already covered Melanie, who I'm reading from my notes because I read this book, 2 fucking years ago, and I couldn't remember anything about it. So as I was skimming it, I took down quick notes about each character. So firstly, we already mentioned Melanie. She is the main protagonist. She is new in school, or I should say new-ish in school, because when the story kicks off, she's already been in the area for, I want to say, like a month or 2.
Yeah. But
so
she doesn't have any friends.
She's
really.
new enough in school. Yeah, she doesn't have any friends. She's just moved to Caraville, which is a great name for a town.
It is.
From San Francisco, so she's feeling a little confined in this small town. She has a job, but she doesn't really have any friends. Her parents are newly divorced. It's a whole thing. Poor Melanie. She is a self-proclaimed nobody, so she's obviously insecure because, she's a teenager. Although she is good at math, and I say that because it's the kickoff point for this whole plot.
Yeah.
Because then she meets Susan. And Susan, I have as the local hottie, amateur director, and it turns out, again, spoiler alert, I guess, although not really because you're listening to it, and we already hit the plot point. Turns out she's also an amateur Glenn Close from Fatal Attraction, and probably dresses like her, too. There's one point where she's wearing, like, a white pantsuit, and I was like, that's definitely, like, straight out of Fatal Attraction.
Yeah,
maybe
really
did that on purpose.
Maybe.
I don't know when that movie came out.
Me either.
It doesn't matter. Then we have Mark Hall, the love interest, of course. I have here marked as sexy orange eater because that's really the first interaction we have with Mark's character, which is weird. We also hear a mention at the beginning of the story about a character by the name of Clyde, but we don't really learn anything about him until the end of the book. So we'll cover him a little bit later. So right now his designation is Mystery Man. Then we have Rindy, who is our unfortunate murder victim and who I also have described as basically Laura Palmer.
Except with black hair.
Except with black hair.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah, beautiful, kind of...
affluent family,
affluent,
misunderstood,
right?
Also obviously a murder victim.
Yeah, poor Rindy.
And then we have some other minor characters that don't really pop up in the story really as much. We have Jeremy, who is a fucking psycho.
Yeah.
And who spells his name strange. When I see that, and I know that he didn't spell his name like that, the author obviously did.
Right.
But when I see it, I'm just like, oh, come on.
Right.
We couldn't end it with just a Y. We had to add an A and an IE. It doesn't matter.
Yeah,
I'm particularly sensitive to that.
He's like your token clown character. He's kind of like a Joker, except that...
he's supposed to be, but he's
but it's
a little...
It's taken to a creepy level. Like, the neuroses is strong in that one.
Yeah, like, he has, like, a weird relationship with Rindy and Susan. And it would seem most of the girls in this... entire friend group. He's particularly close with Rindy. They evidently used to have private dance parties in Jeremy's basement, which we're going to cover later, which sounds very odd to me. But yeah, very close with Rindy, pretty close with Susan.
Yeah.
Loves the ladies. But for the purposes of this story, not in a creepy way, but I would worry for people who would interact with Jeremy perhaps later on in college.
Yeah.
And then we have Tracy, who I have here as just poor plain Tracy. Loud gum chewer. And we discover later is Mystery Man Clyde's sister.
Yeah.
They do a pretty good job. Pike does a pretty good job of not ever giving either of them last names, so you don't make that discovery until someone outright says it. Yeah. And then we have Heidi, who I have here as Bitchy Thespian.
Oh, yeah, she is something else, too. God,
Yeah.
and
Also unattractive. He went out of his way to describe
He
her
did.
as having chunky thighs and acne. And I was like, whoa, I wonder if this was pulled from real life. You know what I mean? Like how Stephen King pulled Carrie from a woman he knew in real life.
Right. Yeah.
I wonder. Well, Stephen King's portrayal of Carrie was more out of pity.
Yeah, it was.
It was. But this, I'm wondering, like, oh shit, did Christopher Pike get dumped by a woman named Heidi, and he's just taking his revenge by describing her as this just hog of a woman?
Yeah, I don't know. I didn't get a lot of. Yeah, there wasn't a lot of empathy in her entire characterization. She's pretty awful.
She is also a very minor character. She is. You only really interact with her in the grand scheme of the story for maybe like 10 minutes total.
Yeah, she's just a plot device, really.
Yeah.
But, yeah.
But there, we obviously went over the plot. That pretty much wraps up all the characters. There are some adults. There are actually a lot of adults in this book. There are, and specifically, a thing that we have not yet encountered in any Christopher Pike book is the police are actually in this one. Like, for real. Yeah, there's an investigation and possibly an indictment.
Yeah, like Captain Michael Cross, who's the lead detective, who's the one who Melanie interacts with right from the start. He shows up to the theater. And then he's in the entire second half of the book. It's really impressive. He actually does police things, which is detecting.
It is. The adults do adult things. Melanie gets arrested by a deputy who's really nasty to her, which I'm sure is a real life application for a lot of people. And then there's the detective. Her parents don't really make a huge appearance,
but they're around.
She lives with her dad.
Yeah,
but her parents are divorced. And based on the few interactions she has with her mother in the book, from a dialogue perspective, I'm pretty sure that Melanie in our current climate could be posting to the narcissist abuse survivors subreddit, because her mother is an absolute just miserable.
Yeah, her mother is really terrible.
Bag.
Yeah. Her father seems lovely, but he's a traveling salesman or something, so he's not around a lot.
No, he's not. And so she's basically on her own in this town that seems hellbent on, charging and trying her for first-degree murder.
Yeah.
Which leads me to the next thing that we were just talking about. The fact that... So, the setup here, as Bree mentioned, is that there's a scene in this play they're putting on where one character shoots another character. So, in order for them to execute this from the drama club standpoint, is they take a gun and presumably load it with blanks to use. So... Obviously, I know that this was the late 80s, and as far as I can tell, anything that happened from a teenage perspective between the years of 1974 and 1989, it was basically just the wild fucking West.
It really was.
But the fact that there was no adult oversight on the production of this play, and the fact that somebody thought it was totally fine to bring a real gun to use in a high school play, and to load it themselves, to buy the bullets themselves, and then load the bullets themselves.
Yeah.
All just seems like a little much. And also, the fact that they expect the main character, Melanie, to know the difference between a blank and the round that ultimately kills Rindy, which is referred to as a wad cutter. Now, I had to look this up because... I'm a woman in the world.
Anything about guns.
I didn't know what a fucking wad cutter is. Nope. So I had to Google it. And evidently, just for those who don't know, a wad cutter is a specific type of bullet that is typically only used for firing at paper targets. So evidently, though, Melanie is just supposed to know what one looks like.
Right.
But the thing that kills me, and we were just talking about this before we started recording, is that blanks look like real bullets. They basically are real bullets with several components just removed. Yeah. So there were a lot of failings here, and I found myself during the book, especially as it surrounds this, going, where the fuck are the teachers?
Yeah.
Where the fuck is the voice of reason going, perhaps we should not be using a real gun?
And Melanie says, when she meets Susan, and then Susan... they get to know each other, and Susan tells her she's an actress, and she tries out for the play, and Susan casts her. And when the script and everything, when they're rehearsing, and Melanie realizes that she's going to have to shoot Rindy, and it's probably important to mention real quick that it's not just the fact that Melanie shot Rindy with a literal gun in the play, but Rindy and Melanie, also had an altercation the previous spring. They got into a car accident, which was a very small sort of hit and run, not hit and run.
It was a fender bender.
Fender bender, thank you. And it was raining and it was no big. But the point is that they already kind of don't. There's a little bit of tension there. And Rindy's beautiful and popular and blah, 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 so there's all that. But Melanie does express to Susan that she is nervous about the whole gun thing. Like, right from the start, it's like, I don't really know if I want to be doing this.
Right from the start, they mention a scenario where an actor died from being shot with a blank. Now, the scenario that they use, or that they point out in the story, is that this unfortunate individual evidently fired a gun holding a blank into his temple, which just seems really stupid. Although I can't help but feel like there's some premonition here, because we were just talking about Brendan Lee.
Right.
And although it was a completely different scenario, he was shot by somebody else. There were a lot of things that went wrong. A gun that hadn't been properly emptied, blanks that were effectively homemade, a whole bunch of shit. But the point is, and you're right, Brie, is that they make a point of calling out in the story that this is not really the best idea. But no one really seems to question it. They're just like, oh, authenticity.
Right.
I guess.
Right.
And it's just kind of like, okay, I guess we're just going to accept that.
Yeah, it's a little weird.
It is very weird.
It is a little weird. Yeah.
Even for 1988, it seems weird.
Yeah, it's a little weird.
Yeah. And then, there were a couple of other things about this that were kind of bizarre. Another thing that we were talking about was the fact that they were real quick to arrest and charge Melanie with this murder. Mm-hmm. And again, going back to the whole, why is there a real gun in this school play thing? Mm-hmm. The fact that at no point did any of the police ask that question, what the fuck was a real gun doing inside a school? Why were you guys messing with this? What is this? It was all just like, oh, she's holding the gun. Mm-hmm. She's under arrest. Yeah.
Even Melanie's lawyer, it's interesting because, again, Captain Michael Cross, who is the lead detective, he does believe Melanie from the start. And this doesn't come out until sort of the end, and we can talk about the, sort of culmination of events in just a minute. We should probably talk about the little play first, because that's what leads to the true killer's identity. But he does suspect people, and he tells Melanie that, he thinks that something weird is going on, and because he is an adult, and this is the one thing that I kind of appreciate about his character, is Pike doesn't make him an oblivious police detective. Like, he follows leads, he talks to everybody. The characters in this book, through like the middle of the book, Melanie's she's like doing her own police investigation, because like that's what she's doing because she doesn't want to go to jail. But like, she tells him things, he follows up. The characters, all of the friend group, talk about how he's come and talked to them. She doesn't trust any of them, because she knows that something is wrong, because obviously Rindy's dead and she didn't kill her. So it's a very but he's a very, like, I appreciate the fact that he is he listens to her and he tries to follow up on some of those leads. And honestly, at the end of the story, Melanie puts in a good fight, and we can talk about that literally. But he kind of saves her, because he's the one who goes and gets our mystery man, who's the one who finally gets our killer to, distracts her long enough for everything to sort of come out. And he kind of puts two and two together. So it's kind of nice to see an adult character, I guess, that's effective, because we haven't seen that just yet. And I don't know if we're going to see that again for a bit. I'm trying to think ahead. Yeah. So they kind of work as a pair, which is kind of nice, as a duo. And she needs someone in her corner because her dad's never around.
And her mom is
worthless.
Her mom, I think, is convinced that she did it.
Her lawyer thinks she did it. Well, her mother hires her lawyer, so those two are basically like the same person. So it's a problem.
And both of them are pretty miserable to her.
They are. They're pretty terrible.
But circle back to the play.
Yeah, so let's talk about the play just real quick, because it's kind of the central part of this story, and it's the answer to the mystery. It's just no one figures it out until the end. So this play is called Final Chance, and Melanie is Melissa, Mark is Charles, Robert is Jeremy, Mary is Tracy, and Rhonda is Rindy. And basically, I'm not going to get too far into this because y'all can read this book. But basically what it is it's the story of couples and relationships and betrayal and, forlorn love and all this kind of thing. And basically, it pits people against one another because they're in love with the same people. It's a good old-fashioned kind of, angsty soap opera tragedy sort of thing. And if the friend group, if they're not in it, because the Final Chance cast is much smaller than the actual friend group. If the friends aren't all in it, they're working around the play. So like some of the characters are also doing sets and like helping with props and that kind of thing. So it's this big sort of theatrical production, and it's Susan's baby because she's like apparently some drama genius. Everyone at school acknowledges the fact that this is like her thing, and she's going to go to like Hollywood, and she's a star actress and that kind of thing, which is sort of an
also the reason they let her basically do this whole thing with zero oversight from anybody. Right.
And supposedly, and this is just a kind of an important little detail, Susan's the one who found the play. So like she went into a town somewhere. It may have been the city. It may have been Des Moines. I don't know. She went somewhere. She went to a bookshop and she found the script. And then she brought it to the group and they were like, we're going to do it. And she was going to direct it. So this play is sort of at the center of things. And what you begin to realize as a reader, way before the characters kind of realize it, I think, is that there are some significant parallels between what is going on in the play and what's actually gone on in this friend group over the past, like, probably 1.5 to 2 years or so. The problem is that Melanie doesn't know any of that because she wasn't around for this sort of the stuff that happened, obviously, before she knew these people. So she's kind of figuring things out through her little investigation, and the more she figures out, the more you realize that this play, it's not just coincidence. Like, it's weird that the characters are mirroring each other, and that's spooky, which is kind of finally what I think allows her to go, And then, as is the case with most Pike books, once sort of a couple things fall into place, then the end resolves itself rather quickly and rather violently, because that's how these things go. But the play is kind of interesting.
Well, it seems kind of boring. Yeah. Like when you actually are like watching it, because there's a section where you're at the play, so you're watching everything unfold. Mm-hmm. And you're just kind of like, this is kind of boring. Mm-hmm. And then, Melanie starts to fill in some of the blanks because this friend group has a significant history. Mm-hmm. And there's a lot of bad blood. Like there is in a lot of Christopher Pike's books, the theme of bad blood. Mm-hmm. And that idea of revenge. And it ultimately comes out that the play, while also serving as a good metaphor for what has kind of happened with that friend group, also kind of plays out the fantasy of how one individual wants that whole cluster resolved. Yep.
It's a revenge fantasy, basically.
Oh, it's totally. Yeah. And spoiler alert. Well, first of all, before I give spoiler alert, don't sign your crime.
I know, right?
I feel like that's common sense, but don't sign your crime, especially if that crime is murder. Yeah. Don't sign your crime. Basically, you find out that the author of the play, Stan Russell, with one L, is just the name Susan Trells, completely rearranged. So you find out that Susan wrote the play, and she planted it at the bookstore, and then went back and bought it, which seems like a real, I guess that you want a paper trail, I guess, but again, your name's on it. You signed your crime. Like what? Yeah. Like it doesn't matter. Yeah. But I saw that and I was like, that's how you get caught.
Yeah. And then she proceeds to set Melanie up. She knows that Melanie and Rindy had their fender bender. So she knows Melanie's perfect. She knows Melanie's new. She knows Melanie has a little bit of a drama background. So she pretends to suck at math and gets, when she doesn't suck at math, and she gets Melanie to tutor her, which is one of the things that Melanie notices towards the end. She knows that something's wrong because she notices when she goes to the theater to meet Susan for sort of their final confrontation, she sees her calculus homework and it's perfect. And Melanie's like, she knows what she's doing. So she sets. So this is the other thing maybe that I like about this book. You're in it for sort of the long game. Like, this is a long con. Like, Susan set Melanie up for this way before. Like, Melanie was done before she even started. Like, she was always going to frame her. Like, that was sort of the thing.
True, except that Susan did mention it was either going to be her or Heidi, because she didn't have any love for Heidi. And she does say that she didn't really have anything personal against Melanie.
No.
But that she fit the role, the actual role of the character better.
Yeah.
And that she would be a better actress, et cetera, et cetera. She just fit the actual part as a whole better. But it could have just as easily been Heidi.
It could have. All I'm saying
she
is...
evidently really hated.
Right, she did really hate her. All I'm saying is the manipulation was pretty intense. Like, until the moment Melanie figures out that it's Susan... Susan is just kind of working her. I mean, but to be fair to Melanie, she did it to all of them. I mean, she had them all sort of, eating out of her hand, except for the one character who we don't meet until the end. And so he's never around, and that's Clyde. And Clyde is the one that, he's been in a rehab
catalyst.
facility. Yeah.
He's the catalyst for this whole thing.
Right.
He didn't even know it.
No, he didn't. Poor Clyde. I was telling Ash at the beginning of this, before we started recording, that Clyde kind of reminds me a little bit of Bert. He's not as bumbling, but it's sort of his entry into the final confrontation and last act, which takes place in the high school theater, reminds me very much of Bert kind of like running into the room and smashing the plexiglass with the snakes at the end of Weekend, where it's like, I'm here and I'm going to save the day. Clyde's not quite as like, oh, I'm going to save you, but I actually made it worse. But it's the same kind of like, they're both very good natured. They're both very good humored. They're both kind of, they're both adored. Like, everybody loved Clyde. He was a football player. And he's paralyzed. And he's the reason that Susan hates Rindy. Because she loves Clyde. And she thinks that Rindy paralyzed Clyde in a drunk driving accident. And it turns out that Rindy wasn't the one who was driving. Clyde was.
And that Rindy took the fall so that Clyde wouldn't have to.
Yeah, because she knew that Clyde's family didn't have any money, and Rindy's family was loaded. So they settled, and Clyde was able to get money to go to the rehab facility and all this. And Clyde says something to the effect of, you all spent your lives hating her, and now she's dead, And Susan, that just completely, like... It's very interesting in the last part of this book to watch Susan kind of go down, like... the spiral, because that just completely undoes her. She's like, okay, well...
Well, she'd been operating under the assumption that it was all Rindy's fault, and then, the whole thing just... Well, and she also was in love with Clyde.
She was,
and he also unloads on her that the feelings are not reciprocated and never have been. And so the thin grasp that she undoubtedly already had
shatters
on reality. She it vaporizes, and she tries, or at least fake tries, to shoot herself.
She does.
But she misses, and she shoots an overhead light instead.
And then faints.
And then presumably goes to jail at the end. But as is the case with most Christopher Pike books, the actual, like, neat and tidy aspect of that procedural is left very much open-ended.
Well, and they say, the thing I always found fascinating about it is, the entire constant about Susan through the book, regardless of, how you feel about her murdering people, is that she is a fantastic actress. And Melanie makes the comment that, like, Captain Michael Cross is pretty confident with all the evidence that they can convict her, but Melanie is sort of like, I don't know about that. And they sort of leave it, like, well, if Susan puts on a performance on the stand, then maybe not. So it's kind of interesting. It's like, the important thing is Melanie is not going to jail, which is sort of the point of this whole thing. But yeah, Susan's kind of, they don't know what's going to happen with Susan.
Although, which is hilarious because they made a point of telling Melanie that she was going to be tried as an adult.
I know. Yeah, the whole thing is just
for first-degree murder, which is a life fucking sentence. And Iowa may have, in 1988 may have had the death penalty. Who knows?
Yeah, I have no idea. But yeah, it's pretty. Actually, intense.
I'm going to look that up because I'm curious.
One thing that I was going to say, because you mentioned the anagram, and I was just going to mention this because we were talking about this prior to beginning our recording, and I was saying that the one of the things that's slightly different about this book versus some of the other ones that we've looked at so far is there's not a really like large, or that's not a good way of phrasing it. There's not a very obvious supernatural element in it. The only thing that really comes close, and your discussion of the name just reminded me of it, is the reason that Melanie puts that whole thing together with the Susan Trells and the Stan Russell is she has a dream. And of course she does. Right.
I forgot about the dream.
Because Pike loves his dream sequences, and he loves his dreams. And she has a dream where she and Rindy are in Rindy's basement. And they're playing Scrabble, because Rindy loves Scrabble, which I, as an English person, really think is cute. But they're playing Scrabble, and it's a very ethereal setup. There's all these, like, beautiful lights, and Rindy looks beautiful, and it's very obvious that it's, you know, kind of just this hazy dream thing. And Rindy is arranging the tiles, and so is Melanie. And Melanie gets the distinct impression that Rindy is sort of trying to tell her something, but she can't sort of put it together in that dream. And she figures it out. That's what, like, she's arranging the letters, and then she figures it out that's what Rindy, or that's what, the tiles were supposed to be spelling out, was showing her was this anagram. And, subconscious or, spirits, who knows. But that's, like, the closest thing we get to a supernatural element in this book. Most of it is pretty much just grounded in a good old-fashioned sort of mystery, and I think from here on out we get some more overt supernatural stuff. Like I think we're going to get into some like werewolves and that kind of stuff. But there's none of that in this, which is fine. But I did remember that dream. That's like the closest thing. That's about it. Melanie's a very pragmatic person, I think.
She is, although she does, she takes this investigation on herself, and she goes like total bad cop.
She does.
At one point, like just short of assaulting somebody. But she definitely, like, I remember reading where she's like, she goes and she like finds Tracy at work.
Yeah, at the movie place.
Corners her. Yeah, at the video store, and she corners her and like drags her back to the back room and all this stuff. And I'm sitting here going like, Melanie, do you want to catch like a witness intimidation charge or a stalking charge too? Because I feel like you need to be a little careful.
Yeah, there's a little bit of she gets.
I mean, I know suspension of disbelief, but I'm just kind of sitting here like she just walked into Jeremy's house.
She did. Yeah. She's like, hey.
So throw breaking and entering in on that, too. That was another really interesting part of that, too. We talk about Jeremy being a little bit unhinged and his complicated relationship with the girls in this group. And one of the things that happens that's helpful to Melanie, that helps her put kind of those last few pieces together, is when she goes to Jeremy's house to ask him questions about, like, the group's history.
Yeah.
Because she's trying to fill in the blanks, and she sees that he recorded the play.
Yes.
And she gets excited because she thinks that in the recording, she's going to be able to see what it is that happened when Rindy was shot. And unfortunately for her, during that scene, basically what he has done is he has cut out and put in the footage from that scene from rehearsal.
Yeah.
Over it instead of the actual, and she just looks at him and she was like, well, why the fuck did you do that? And then you realize that he's kind of caught in the middle. He doesn't want, he knows that Susan shot Rindy.
Yeah.
He knows it for a fact.
Yeah.
But he can't wrap his brain around the fact that two girls that he really cares about are both potentially going to be gone forever. One already is. And then the possibility of Susan going to jail is a little bit too much for his delicate psyche to handle. Yeah. So he goes, and he mostly disappears for the rest of the book. He's hiding in his house. but yeah, that you get kind of excited, and she gets excited because she's just like, I'm gonna put this to rest for once and all, and she just is just gutted. And then he gives her the gun. He does.
Well, Clyde, or is it Mark? No, it's Mark. Mark says to her, like, afterwards, so they have the little, they have all the things with Susan, and there's an epilogue. Of course there is, because this is Christopher Pike book. And they go out to the reservoir, which is somewhere where these kids have hung out a bunch, and that's where Clyde had his accident. So it's like this place that is meaningful to them. And they go out to the reservoir, and Mark tells Melanie that basically, Jeremy was in love with Rindy. Susan was his best friend. And so he just couldn't, he couldn't lose both of them. He didn't want to be responsible, I suppose, for losing both of them. But he also likes Melanie. And that's why he gave her the gun. Because he figured that he knew Susan was up to something, but he wasn't willing to, I think, give evidence or whatever. And that was something else. I was like, well, what the hell's going to happen when it goes to trial? He's going to have to, but...
Well, yeah, because even Melanie says it's either to Heidi or no, she says it to Heidi where she's like, you can either talk to me now or you can be subpoenaed later.
Right.
And it's just kind of like, oh, way to throw out.
I know.
Fucking procedure.
I know.
Okay.
I know.
But I mean, that is a good point. It's kind of like, well, what's your end game here? Because you can't refuse to go to trial. Although I guess in his case, they could have argued that a man who was or an individual, I should say, that was just so mentally distraught should not be made to testify in a court of law. I don't know. I'm not a fucking attorney.
Me either.
But the whole thing is just...
It's a lot.
And that was interesting that he just, because I feel like and I think this about a lot of his books, if we were allowed to have a longer story, or, God forbid, if we were allowed to have a movie or something of this, that is an area that you could expand upon. I think Jeremy would probably be a little bit of an interesting character. I mean, when you're talking about teen fiction, you're talking about something that's relatively easy to digest, so you have to have not an overly simple plot, but you can't have something that drags on and on and on for hundreds of pages. Yeah. And especially at this time when teen horror fiction was still kind of in its fledgling stages, you kind of have to make it very compact and easy to kind of, I mean, we burn through these books in a day or two. But I feel like if we were given a chance to have more of the story, I actually feel like the story could have made a pretty decent movie.
Yeah.
A pretty decent freeform, for freeform movie.
Yeah.
But I would have been interested to expand on Jeremy's character, especially because, as far as the other... There are some really interesting characters in this book. Him, Melanie, Susan, Rindy. That's really it, though. Clyde, I guess, but you don't really see Clyde, and that's really it. Everyone else, especially and I know he must do this on purpose because the stories are always about the girls, but the male love interest is always basically a walking piece of white toast.
Oh my God, Mark is so boring.
Yeah. But I mean, they all are. The love interest, the male love interest in all of these books so far anyway. And I mean, I know we're talking about his 80s books, so and I don't know how his writing has changed as time has gone on. But walking piece of white toast.
Yeah, really boring.
It's I kind of want to see, maybe he does. I kind of want to see a story where the girl doesn't end up with anybody. But chances are, if that does happen, maybe later on. Oh, okay. So Bree knows something I don't. All right.
Well, I think we're gonna get some variety. So I think it'll be good. But I think this is a good thing to talk about because I think you're right up to this point, and I think we should remember it because it'll be interesting to talk about in the next couple books to see if it changes because it's going to. I just can't remember how quickly because it's been a while.
Well, and like I said, as we burn through his library, and we are going in order of publication. So once we get into maybe the late 90s, I'll be interested to see how the tone and the themes and the characters and et cetera, how they kind of start to change. Because I'm sure that they're not like this still because he still has a pretty big following and he is still writing. And I feel like if you had the same exact setup, well, I mean, you'd have Twilight.
Yeah, pretty much. Well, the other thing that he starts to do that I think will be interesting, which he's sort of done a little bit in these ones that we've looked at so far, and he did in this book too. We talked a lot about class issues in some of these other books, and there's definitely class issues in these because Melanie doesn't have a lot of money, and Rindy has a ton of money. You know, there's always this kind of thing. But the other thing that he starts to do, and I can tell you this for a fact because I'm thinking of like 2 or 3 books in particular, but I can't remember where they come in the sequencing. We'll just have to wait and see. He starts to take on some social issues. So like there's some like social, cultural, political kind of stuff, like in the guise of YA fiction. So it's teenagers grappling with some of these things. And the other thing that he starts to do is and this is a good segue to just a note I made, because I said we had talked in a previous episode about this idea of like teenagers making bad decisions and then having to pay for them, which is not a new concept in YA fiction. But I feel like in this book, you know, Clyde's car accident, Rindy gets killed, the letter that Melanie writes to her ex-boyfriend that implicates her, which is completely coincidental, but it doesn't do her any favors at the beginning. And so, like, he starts to play with that in later books. He takes that idea that is not, like I said, a new idea or anything, but he takes it, and what he starts to do is he starts to pair it with, like, more serious issues. Like, you know, what happens when, you know, I don't know. I'm thinking of one in particular, like what happens when a teenager has a pregnancy that they have to terminate, for example. There's a book that deals with that. And there's a whole bunch of stuff. My point is that I think he starts to expand, which I think will be interesting. And so I think some of the things that we're noticing with some of these characters will change too, which I think will be cool to talk about in the arc of his library, because it's kind of neat to see how the writing changes. Yeah.
Well, and I mean, it has to have, because like I said, he's still publishing. People are still buying them, so I'm sure. Yeah. How could it not? How could the tone or the themes not have changed? So it'll be. That's why I'm glad that we decided to do this in order of publication, because Slumber Party was very like. Slumber Party was his first, and that was very straightforward. Yeah. It wasn't bad, but it was very straightforward. Yeah. And then what was after that? Weekend, yeah. Which was good. I liked Weekend. And that was also kind of complicated. That plot was a lot more complicated, and the issues that group of friends were dealing with were also complicated. Yeah. Mm-hmm. And then we had Tachyon Web, which
Let's not even. Let's just. And then
I'm sorry, Mr. Pike, but.
Then we had Tachyon Web. That's it. It was his foray into sci-fi. He tried. It wasn't that great.
He did.
It's not his fault.
And you know what? I can't say I've never published a science fiction book, so I'm gonna shut the hell up.
Yeah, it's fine. Whatever. And then we have this book, which I feel like is building on, you know, a multi-layered plot. So it'll be interesting to see what, you know, as we keep going. Mm-hmm. Yeah, as we keep going. So it's going to be cool. I had a couple of, I just wanted to mention this. I had a couple of angst alerts with this book.
We're back, guys. And we're back with angst alerts.
Angst alerts. And so I'm just going to pick on one, well, the one Ashley already mentioned, which is the Melanie Tracy interaction at the video store, which I don't know if there's anything more 80s in the best way possible than an altercation in a video rental store.
Right.
I love it so much.
Because it wasn't even a Blockbuster.
I know. I love it. It's on page 141 and 143 if you want to check it out. The other one that I have here that I adore to the moon and back is on page 59 and 60 when Melanie is asking Mark to the Sadie Hawkins dance at a Pizza Hut that is adjacent to a farm.
That hits home a little bit for me, though, because remember, like, going and sitting down to eat in a Pizza Hut? Yeah.
Oh, no. Man. Make no mistake, everyone. I'm not enamored with this because I'm judging it. I'm enamored with it because I feel it in my bones. Like, it is something...
I'm enamored with it because it's something that we did when we were growing up. Because the Pizza Hut in the small town where we grew up is actually... Or actually, no, it wasn't by a cornfield or by a farm, but it was across the street from, like, a cemetery.
Oh, totally.
In, like, the middle of nowhere. And, oh God, that pizza buffet.
Oh, yeah. I mean, I just love it. And I would also just like to point out along with that she made the outfits for them for the Sadie Hawkins dance, and it was like she made them shirts. They were like cowboy shirts. Melanie did. She and Mark, and they were like pink satin. And I love that whole thing because I'm like...
that to me is upsetting, but...
I love it. I'm like, there is nothing that says, I am trying to, I don't know, carve out
I will make you mine, Mark, and I will do it with this pink satin shirt.
I just love it.
You will be mine.
I loved it so much that I capitalized Pizza Hut when I was typing up this note.
Well, it is a proper noun. So
I know. No, I mean, it's all in caps. Because I was like, this is the best. Like, Pizza Hut is all in capital letters. Anyway, it's awesome.
I'm not going to lie now. I kind of want Pizza Hut.
I know, right?
Even though I'm not even really that wild about Pizza Hut, I'm just, let's take a nostalgic trip.
Let's.
Those red cups.
Yeah. And then we've already talked about some of this, but I had, these plot devices and themes that we've chatted about. But the dreams, this book is full of red herrings. Of course it is. The romance and the love and the sex component. There's a lot of violence in this book, but most of it comes in the closing sort of confrontation between Susan and Melanie, which P.S. I think is one of the longer confrontations we've looked at because it goes on for a minute. Like they're having
a discussion. Susan basically goes Bond villain and just lets Melanie interview her for all of this information. I'm like, wow, she doesn't give a fuck. She's just going to give her all of it. Of course, she is planning on killing her in the middle of the auditorium at the high school. Like, in the middle of going to hear a gun going off.
And in the middle of the flipping day, too. It's like 3 o'clock in the afternoon.
Her angle is that she's going to make it look like Melanie killed herself.
Suicide, yeah.
But I mean,
still,
we couldn't do it like in the middle of the woods.
Right. Yeah. I was like, take her to the reservoir. Anyway.
That damn reservoir. Go tell her you're going to take her to see the ducks.
Right. Exactly. Don't forget about those ducks.
Full circle.
Full circle. We mentioned the class thing. We mentioned the supernatural thing with the dream. Lots of secrets. Lots of alcohol here too. Lots of drinking. And then the last thing I just wanted to say about this, and it's random, but on page 141 of this book, there is a reference to the movie Halloween.
Yes.
And
at the video store.
And I love that movie.
Forever.
I
love that movie.
I do a Halloween movie marathon the entire month of October, every October, and I always kick it off. I watch different movies every year, or I try and change it up. I watch some of the old standbys. But I kick it off with Halloween every time, and you can say what you want about that movie, folks, but it holds up. And so Tracy is shelving Halloween when Melanie walks in to be like, what the hell? And I just love that because I'm like, it just makes me happy. It's like a little detail that I feel like Christopher Pike was like, here we go.
Yeah, of course she's putting a horror movie away
while
the small town is in the middle of a homicide investigation.
Right. Yeah, exactly. I was like, okay. But overall, I think, especially coming from Tachyon Webb, excuse me, I think Last Act is a pretty class act. Do you like that? Yeah.
Wow.
I liked it.
Wow.
No, I like this book. I think it's very fun.
Yeah, but you can't undo what you just said.
I don't care. I was trying to be. I wasn't
trying to be what?
Trying to be not cool, which isn't hard for me. So, yeah. It was good. I enjoyed it.
So we talked about the music because I said to you earlier, I believe before we started recording, that this book was published in 1988, and friends, 1988 was a good year. Mm-hmm. It was a bad year depending on who you ask. I guess anyone with good taste would probably say it wasn't the best year. But for those of us who don't give a shit, 1988 was a really good year. And there is and I think I did mention this already. Jeremy was in love with Rindy, and something that they used to do together was they would have private dance parties in his basement, and he would blast the music. And she makes a remark about how dancing was like a mating ritual for him, and how every time they would finish up, he would propose marriage. I don't know what the hell's going on there, but in 1988 there were some bangers, I gotta say. So I have a list pulled up And I will make an attempt anyway to link some of these or do a Spotify playlist, whatever I have time to do. In order of beginning of 1988 onward, we have number 1, Faith by George Michael.
Oh, I love that song.
Yes.
Oh, it's so good.
Need You Tonight by INXS, which admittedly is very matey.
It is, yeah.
Also, Sexy Strangulation. May he rest in peace.
Oh, Michael Hutchins.
And also, Brie, you'll particularly like this one. Got My Mind Set on You by George Harrison was a top hit in 1988. So was Never Gonna Give You Up by Rick Astley.
Oh my God.
Sweet Child of Mine by Guns N' Roses.
This is like the 80s music utopia.
Yes. Roll With It by Steve Winwood is on this list. I'm not going to go through the whole list in order. Is This Love by Whitesnake. The Flame by Cheap Trick.
Wow.
Man in the Mirror by Michael Jackson.
That's a good one, too.
Simply Irresistible by Robert Palmer. Hold On to the Nights by our favorite Richard Marx.
Oh, Richard Marx forever. Yeah.
Yes. Father Figure. My personal favorite George Michael song.
That's a great song.
A Groovy Kind of Love by Phil Collins. Oh, man.
Oh, boy.
It's no easy lover, I gotta say.
We're going through, like, Janine Pike's record collection from the 80s.
We really are. All that's missing is Alabama. Incidentally, Red Red Wine by UB40 is on this list. Kokomo by the Beach Boys.
Oh, my God. This is our childhood.
Shit. Shoulda Known Better by Richard Marx. What else? Tell It to My Heart by Taylor Dane. Let's see. Don't You Want Me by Jody Watley.
Wow.
What else? New Sensation by INXS. Candle in the Wind.
Wow.
The first one, people. If anyone is listening to this that thinks Candle in the Wind and thinks of 1997 and Goodbye England's Rose, just remember that there was a song before that that was about Marilyn Monroe.
Marilyn Monroe.
Pink Cadillac by Natalie Cole.
Wow.
What else is on here? And Valerie by Steve Winwood.
Nice.
Nice.
Yeah, seriously.
Steve Winwood's on here a couple times. I gotta say.
She just listed, like, okay, our mother had okay, so I was born in 1981. Ashley was born 5 years later. So our mother had cassette tapes, as one did in the 80s. And she owned Whitesnake, Phil Collins. I mean, this is like our entire childhood. Oh, yeah. This is our entire childhood, this list. Like, I mean, and there's some good ones. I would also just like to say, going back to the beginning of the list, that George Harrison song, the video for that song is it's fantastic.
It's the best.
It's so good. If you get on YouTube and watch it, if you're having a cruddy day, people, it'll bring you right back up.
Once
it
you
is
get
so
past,
good.
So there is going to be an initial reaction of either shock, disgust, or trepidation, or a combination of all three. But you just got to get past like the first 5 seconds, and once you do, it's just A+.
Yeah, it's real good.
A+.
It's super. You should watch it.
Yes.
Yeah.
And also, if you do go back and decide to read this book based on the episode of this podcast, I guess.
Because we do such a good job.
We do. God help you. When you get to that scene where they're talking about Jeremy and Rindy dancing in the basement, I just want you to imagine them like awkward 80s, lots of like elbow and finger snapping type dancing to Heaven is a Place on Earth by Belinda Carlisle.
I love that song.
If you don't do it, you're doing yourself a disservice. I gotta say.
You really are. Do it, people. Do it.
I mean, I kind of want to do it now.
I know, right?
My husband's not home. So
maybe
even if he was. I don't care.
Maybe Ashley will link to some of these things on the website.
I will.
Yeah. Maybe I'll put some of it on Instagram because it is great. If you were to read this book with the soundtrack in the back, I feel like it would give, if you had a playlist, it would give
a real special flavor.
Just another atmospheric quality.
It's amazing. It really is amazing. And I kind of can't wait to continue. Like, I just flip to the front.
Yeah.
And then I'm like, oh shit, what was going on in 1988? And I'm kind of excited for when we get to like the early to
early
mid 90s,
oh,
just to see if we get any sort of like plaid and Doc Marteny kind of that kind of angst.
I bet we do. I bet we do. Oh yeah, I can't remember specifically, but I'm pretty sure.
And one thing, I'm sorry that we didn't cover. Book covers.
Oh yeah, let's talk about the cover art real quick.
Okay, so where's mine? Oh, here it is. So I have in front of me the version that some poor person from New Jersey sent to me from Amazon. I think I bought this book for $1. Is, I believe, supposed to be Melanie standing on stage. The spotlight is on her. She is wearing a god-awful rose-colored weird culotte pantsuit number. She's holding a smoking gun.
Yep, that's what I've got.
In front of an empty auditorium. And it says Christopher Pike in that wonderful neon slashy font.
Yes.
And then last act, and under that subtitle, the stage is set for murder.
Dun-dun.
Murder.
Yeah.
Now, I don't know, is that the version you also have?
That is the version I have.
There are, if you want to get on Goodreads, people, and check this shit out, there's some good stuff. There is the version that was published by... Whoops, fucked it up. Hang on. Published by... So the version we have was published April 1st, 1988 by Archway Paperbacks.
Nice.
Which I think the Archway Paperbacks are the majority of the ones that you and I have had. I think all of them so far have been Archway Paperbacks.
Yes.
But there's also a version published April 1st, 1988 by Simon Pulse.
Okay.
Which is just... It kind of looks like the cover of... It kind of reminds me a little bit of a version of the cover of The Great Gatsby that I saw a long time ago. Not the classic one with the eyes and the night sky and but something else where you've got a man's face in the background and then you've got a woman, I guess, wearing a nightgown. What the hell is that? There's a lamp. There's a car with its headlights, foreshadowing. And it's got like that Harlequin kind of feel to it. And then we've got something a little bit more on the nose, published November 1st, 1989 by Hodder Children's Books. This one is a cover. This is very macabre. This is very macabre.
There's always one that is.
Basically, dead Rindy, her face is looking very, dead in despair, and she's sprawled across what appears to be in front of a marquee, like a makeup table, so she's got the marquee mirror with the lights and everything, and on it, scrawled in what appears to be blood red lipstick, it says Last Act. But that is dark, my friends.
Yeah, that is. I'm looking at it now.
Some of the... there's also another version published in 1989, again by Hodder Children's Books, which is just a grotesque version of a theatrical mask. And then there's this... I didn't look at this one yet. But it is, I guess, the version that was published in Italy.
Uh-huh.
Ultimo Atto.
Okay.
Final Act. And that is... What is that? That's way more straightforward. It's a bunch of surly-looking teenagers sitting in an auditorium and there's a gun in the foreground.
Yep, that's right. Weird.
Yep.
There are a lot of covers for this book.
There are. And they're all gold.
Yeah, they really are.
Every time I look, because, and I don't know if you did the same thing, but when we started doing this, I bought like the first, I want to say 7 books. Just up front. And all of them so far have been the Archway paperbacks.
Yeah.
So I'm now going to be going out of my way to see if I can get lucky enough, because when you buy these used, you don't always know what you're getting as far as cover art is concerned. Yeah. So I have my fingers crossed that I'm going to end up with one of these Hodder Children's Books versions because I'm a little fascinated, or the Simon Pulse versions. But yeah, I remember, and I want to say, I can look into this. but I don't feel like looking it up right now. I want to say that Archway also did some of the publishing for R.L. Stine.
I think that is right. Yeah.
Which I think we intend on getting to
At some point.
I
mean, we were going to do a mini episode about, maybe we'll do a mini-sode about, like, R.L. Stine. We could do a mini-sode about Fear Street, and then maybe we'll do a mini-sode about, like, the Nightmare Hall book. I mean, there's a lot of, you know.
Yeah, and we talked about doing a lot.
I mean, we can do a mini-sode of R.L. Stine once we get maybe through, like, a few more Christopher Pike. The problem with Fear Street, actually, it's not a problem. Love you, R.L. Stine. I really do. He's a cool dude. The problem with Fear Street is that in and of itself is a podcast. Because there's a lot of those. I mean, there may be... Yeah, and then he did Fear Street, and then he did a whole prequel series about how Fear Street became Fear Street. Like, he did the whole thing about the Fear family. It's a lot.
Oh, I read... Yeah, those are actually the only ones I read.
Yeah. So, like...
Those were wild.
They're cool, but it's like a whole thing. Maybe when we get through this, we'll do, but we should perhaps we'll do a mini-sode about, like, other, you know, horror YA stuff that was going on.
Oh yeah, we talked about doing a lot of stuff. So we should probably get more than, 4 episodes under our belt.
Well, there probably won't be a 2-year hiatus.
Be self-critical, but yeah.
There won't be a 2-year hiatus between this one and the next one. With that being said, let me tell you what's next, folks. So the next book that we're going to read is called Spellbound. And I'm just going to read you what the little...
Are you going to back cover it?
Yeah, I'm just going to read you the back cover of it, and then that's going to be it. Well, I'll read you the little front cover and then the back. Spellbound. You can close your eyes. It won't help. And then on the back cover...
I feel like that's also just describing a lot of sexual encounters that I've had with previous boyfriends.
Pretty much, right? And then on the back it says, no one knew how the girl had died. They found Karen Hawley in the mountain stream, her skull crushed. There was only one witness to the tragedy, Karen's boyfriend, Jason Whitfield. He said a grizzly had killed her, but a lot of people don't believe him. They thought Jason murdered her in a fit of rage. And now weeks have passed, and Jason has another girlfriend, Cindy Jones. And there are the new kids in town. Joni Harper, the quiet English beauty. The Cindy's brother, Alex, cannot get out of his mind. And Bala, the foreign exchange student from Africa. Wow, sorry. The grandson...
There's a lot going on.
Yeah, the grandson of a powerful shaman. Together they will return to the place where Karen was killed. Some will die. The others will come face to face with a horror beyond imagining.
Wait, so some will die?
Boom, yeah.
We're getting a multiple murder?
Amazing. I know! Are we ready? I'm ready.
I'm ready.
Yeah, I also think that this one is going to bring us back into some more, like I said, overt supernatural stuff. So it's going to be good. I'm excited.
Right on.
Yeah.
Right on.
Yeah.
All right, well, see you in 2 years.
Yeah, 2 years from now. If anyone is still listening to us, we're sorry.
I mean, who cares? We're doing this for fun anyway. I mean,
I know.
Not that we don't care about you, everybody.
We do.
But,
yeah, we had some stuff happen, but now we're back. We're excited.
We're really just screaming into the void, aren't we?
But, I mean, isn't everyone?
Yeah. Yeah, you know what? Fair point. Fair point.
Yeah, it's all good.
On that note, we will see you next time.
We'll see you next time.
Thanks for listening, and be sure to join us next time.